Hello, and welcome to my presentation on ethics, power and professionalism, where I'll be focusing on the representation of vaccination passports within online news articles, whilst considering how those in the industry could have challenged the ethical expectations of their publications. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Jessica Hughes and I'm a third-year student at Brighton University studying English Literature and Media Studies. I've always had an interest in news platforms of all mediums. However, what I find most intriguing is the development of online journalism. This is what my key focus will be on within this presentation, along with my own research into the ethical dilemmas of the industry. Throughout my presentation, I'll be exploring what ethics actually is, followed by ethics within journalism, more specifically online journalism. Next, I'll be introducing my case studies of the Telegraph's reports titled Vaccine Passports for Work Considered by Nearly a Third of Major Businesses, and COVID vaccine documentations are here to stay whether we like it or not. With these articles, I intend on examining the governing regulations and codes made by IPSO, Ofcom and NUJ that should have been followed and then assessing the conflicts that this may have elicited. Following this, I'll be turning my attention towards my own personal ethical considerations and how I would use them in a professional sense when I eventually enter a job role within this career path. Attempting to define ethics has led to finding many different opinions on what people's understanding of the word is. However, I've come to conclude there is no definitive definition of what ethics is. Rather, it's a term used to address a certain code of morals to enact. In my research, I did, however, come across the works of Chris Frost, a professor of journalism who wrote that ethics is a way of studying morality, which allows decisions to be made when individuals face specific cases of moral dilemma. From this, what I found is that he is essentially proposing ethics as a method of evaluating a topic in terms of an agreed set of morals or codes. Similarly, Henry Sidgwick, a professor of moral philosophy, wrote that ethics is the science or study of what is right or what ought to be, so far as this depends upon the voluntary actions of individuals. Considering that ethics has been referred to as a study of what is or isn't abiding to expected morals or codes, my own understanding of this term has been influenced by this idea. In being asked to focus on an area of ethics within an industry of media, I was able to reflect on what my own ethical values were, as well as look at what others have deemed ethically correct. My own ethics circle strongly around a few specific ideals, one of them being a sense of having the freedom of speech allowed to be conveyed in one's work. This means the ability to share opinions and facts, although not to confuse the two, be permissible within writing and journalism. I have considered, however, that some opinions can be controversial or at the detriment of others, and because of this, another ethical value I think is important is to ensure no writings are discriminatory towards a particular group or individual. Lastly, I think most importantly, is the value of truth. It goes without saying that topics in the news should always be approached and presented with nothing but facts. However, this is not always the case. This leads me on to ethics in online journalism specifically. Ethics in online journalism is seen as a code of conduct that should be adhered to when publishing work to be read by the public. Online journalism published by different curators or under different names such as The Guardian or The Telegraph vary in ethical codes that they abide by. Some have their own set of rules like the BBC, and some follow the guidance of specific unions such as the National Union of Journalism, also known as the NUJ, or the Independent Press Standard Organisation, also known as IPSO. Whilst different, both the NUJ and IPSO have a set of principles that advise journalists on how to carry out their work ethically. Clauses of rules they have set vary from privacy to accuracy to discrimination and have many other creditable conventions too. Having a specific set of ethical guidelines for a journalist to follow has allowed for this medium of news presentation, by that I mean online journalism, to have excelled over recent years. An Ofcom report found that whilst TV remained the most used platform for news consumption, it has decreased while social media being used to share news has gone up. With the knowledge that there has been an increase in press release being more conveniently accessible, it can be said to have had a significant factor in how political issues and debates influence the public sphere. Coined by Edmund Burke in 1787, the Fourth Estate was introduced regarding the press reports in the House of Commons. It referred to the fourth out of the 6 estates of society, in which the press and news media hold a significant ability to frame political issues. And whilst it's not formally identified as part of the political system, media such as the news or press undeniably have a great influence on social or public affairs. A significant example of how the media has been allowed to influence political affairs is the coverage of vaccination passports, and how by acting not unlike that of a government watchdog has been able to influence the public sphere's reaction and knowledge on the topics surrounding the idea of vaccines and even further vaccine passports themselves. This idea of a vaccination passport, or an immunity passport as it's also referred to, was first introduced regarding the COVID-19 pandemic in late April of 2020. The certificates would be a legal document granted to those who have received both doses of their jabs and could potentially be relevant in areas under the 3C rule: closed spaces, close contact settings, and crowded places. This was said by the NHS in 2020. The media over the past months has dominated the majority of focus with pushing for the introduction of a vaccine passport, arguably weighing heavily biased towards the idea of enforcing it. Whilst researching for the case studies based on journalist coverage of this topic, The Telegraph consistently spoke out on their support of such a thing. Before I continue with my case studies, I'd like to revisit something that Frost said in regards to one of the main debates discussed around online journalism, and this is the idea of the public interest versus the truth. He wrote that, all too often, the right to know is used as an excuse to publish circulation-boosting journalism. Whether this is designed to appeal to readers' purient nature or pander to their prejudices does not seem to matter, as long as there is a profit to be made from increasing sales. In light of this, I'll be looking at Patrick O'Flynn's article for The Telegraph, problematically titled, COVID Vaccine Documentations Are Here to Stay, Whether We Like It or Not. This is from January in 2021. Instinctively, a reader would think that this is a fact, as that is what would be in line with the ethical expectations of a journalist. However, as it stands, at the time of publication, this was not in fact the case. It was merely conjecture that could easily mislead the reader's understanding of the position of the passport. In Clause 1, under the accuracy section, Ipso have stated that the press must take care not to publish inaccurate, misleading, or distorted information or images, including headlines not being supported by the text. This is a prime example of especially the latter of the statement. The headline was at no time supported by the text, as from January 2021, the implications of mandating a vaccine passport had not yet been discussed at depth nor confirmed. Flynn's article subverts from the ethical values of not just Ipso but the NUJ's Code of Conduct too. Being that it was primarily based on conjecture, put more plainly opinion, it's within the fourth point of the journalist guidelines from the NUJ's Code of Conduct that a writer should differentiate between fact and opinion, something that the Telegraph reporter has failed to do so within this article. After comparing the relevance of a vaccine passport to our personal GPs having access to medical records, he goes on to question what will happen when the only non-inoculated people are those who have taken a deliberate decision not to have the vaccine, and therefore not to make their own contribution to the protection of society as a whole, shaming and discriminating against those who withhold from having the vaccine. He attempts to create a negative narrative towards those who for various reasons opt out for having or receiving a jab that they feel has not been sufficiently tested or researched. His proposition that the non-inoculated have decided not to make a contribution to protect society is highly unethical and discriminatory. Also published by The Telegraph, the journalist Bill Gardner headlined in July 2021, introducing the discussion of vaccine passports at work considered by nearly a third of major businesses. Gardner's articles include several statistics, all according to industry surveys and all assumed factual. However, it can be argued that the sharing of these statistics, for example, more than 30% of large UK firms have signalled that staff may be asked for proof of vaccinations before they can physically return to work, is for the purpose of persuading others to also comply and accommodate to the vaccine passports becoming mandate at work as well as elsewhere. It is in my opinion that whilst it can be argued that it is in the public's interest to know this, it also pushes a political agenda that vaccines are to be implemented, which is something that should be handled delicately. Ipsos section specific to the public interest states that the journalist must protect the public from being misled by an action or statement of an individual or organisation. And in this case, it can be argued that the introduction of a narrative of the vaccine passports being obligatory in a workplace encourages not only the people in the public, but also business owners too, to follow suit and enforce the same rules, despite further stating in his article that the government themselves have not initiated this. These two case studies subvert from my own set of ethical values. They knowingly blur the line between fact and opinion, causing their articles to confuse their readers and bend what the truth of the situation is. With such an important topic such as the vaccine passports being spoken about a lot within the media right now, it is shocking that the majority of coverage of it came from a heavily biased perspective that shamed those who potentially oppose from their views. Whilst I do acknowledge that a journalist has the right for freedom of speech and is encouraged to take their own perspective on a topic, it should not be done by discriminating against others or by confusing conjecture with comment or fact. If I were a journalist myself and was publishing my work online, I would have approached the topic from a neutral perspective that didn't encourage a biased debate that could lead to discriminating against a group of people, nor express statements that were not supported by informed facts. Ensuring that my writing only explored the truth would be above all else the most important thing, and if sharing my opinion, I will do so with clear intentions so that the reader could differentiate between the two. My interest within this field of work had me wanting to explore a career as an online journalist. However, after familiarising myself with the intricacies of a handful of existing writers, I can honestly say that I would much rather a more honest line of work, as it seems that they are heavily influenced by those who pay. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.